How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the time that I met the Attorney General, Xavier Becerra. So this is actually a question I put out to you guys through the YouTube community section and also on my Instagram. Also, if you're not following me on Instagram, do that. It's a great way for you to get engaged with stuff like this. I float around a lot of topics to you guys and just like extra content, stuff behind the scenes, stuff like that. But the question I put out is, would you guys like to hear, my experience in the time that I met Xavier Becerra? And it was a resounding yes. I think it was like 98% of people, it was like 800 people who voted, and you guys all said, yes, tell us about the time you met Xavier Becerra. So I'm gonna have to go through a little bit of history for you guys of how I met Xavier Becerra and kind of the circumstances surrounding why I met Xavier Becerra. So I went to law school in Pennsylvania. I went to Penn State School of Law. And if you're not aware with kind of like how law school goes, you do your normal school throughout the year, and then every year in between the breaks during the summer, you do a legal internship. So after my second year, I applied for a bunch of legal internships, and one of them that I applied for was for the correctional law section of the DOJ of the Attorney General's office in Sacramento, California. And the reason why I did that is not because I necessarily agree with what goes on with the DOJ in the state of California or the Attorney General's office, but it was more personal to me. Two of my parents work in the correctional field, and I've seen a lot of what they have to deal with and a lot of nasty things that happen. And specifically, I've seen my family members actually get sued by various inmates because of their occupation, and the inmates claiming that they did various things. And a lot of times they're not only suing them criminally, but they're also suing them civilly and trying to take, money from them and trying to really do whatever they can. And a lot of the time it's very frivolous allegations. And I would actually say most of the time, it's like 99% of the time that it's very frivolous claims that you see coming out of inmates against correctional officers. And so that's actually why I applied for the AG's office and for this specific section. Otherwise, I would not have taken any other job in the AG's office. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of why I say that. And so I was accepted into the program, and I actually did a 4 or 5 month internship with the AG's office in Sacramento with the correctional law section. And during that internship, we did a lot of cases involving trying to protect correctional officers who are being sued by inmates, and also the state who's being sued by inmates for whatever actions. Usually it's a lot of crazy, frivolous stuff. So let me talk to you a little bit about my experience at the AG's office, because I've had a little bit of time behind enemy lines. I've engaged with a lot of these attorneys, not only in the correctional law section, but in some of the other sections. I've talked to some of them. And in my experience with the correctional law section, I would say those people are kind of the unsung heroes of the AG's office. They are kind of the redhead stepchild. A lot of people in that building don't believe in what they're doing. They don't believe in them, protecting correctional officers. A lot of individuals in that building believe that we should trust the inmates. If the inmates are saying that correctional officers did something wrong, then we should just pay them out. And I saw a lot of that while I was in the office. There was a lot of crazy settlements to the inmates because it gets very expensive for these inmates to drag out litigation, and they draw out a lot of litigation. It's not unusual for one inmate to have multiple cases over multiple years, just keep bringing stuff up. So a lot of times you would see cash settlements. And actually, even in the Eastern District, there was a mandatory settlement conference where you would have to float offers to the inmates. A lot of the times you would have to come forward with something. The AG's office in general, and also the state of California, is not really interested in us fighting these types of claims. They think that we should just pay the inmates. And I would say that the correctional law section that I operated out of, and a lot of those attorneys, were probably the only conservative ones in that entire building. I mean, it's a giant building in downtown Sacramento. I drove there like every day. It's a giant building. There are thousands of attorneys that work there. There were a lot of other sections. There wasn't just the correctional law section. You had stuff like the environmental law section, and you can only imagine what those type of people are like. Government law, stuff like that, tort and condemnation. There were just a lot of sections, but I would say pretty much all the other sections were very liberal, filled with very liberal and left-leaning attorneys, and that's what you would expect when you go to the AG's office. And I really didn't expect anything else, going into the AG's office, during my internship. So really, the setup for me meeting Xavier Becerra has to do with, once your internship is over, you kind of do this exit interview or exit meeting with Xavier Becerra, and this actually took place on the last day that I was interning at the office. Me and the rest of the legal interns in the correctional law section, along with all the other interns with all the other divisions, the environmental law section, the tort section, all the other sections, the criminal section, we all had a meeting with Xavier Becerra. And so it's at the end of the day, we get all herded into the elevator, the special elevator, and we go to the top floor, essentially the penthouse of this state building that the AG's office sits in. His office is at the very house. He's got the penthouse suite because he is the AG. And so it opens up and he has the entire top floor. And it's not just his office. He does have an office section, but I mean, on the floor, he has all of his like staff attorneys. I mean, everybody who works for him is on that floor. There are probably hundreds of people who are on that floor. It's really crazy, and no wonder why, you know, he gets a lot of stuff pumped out fast, because he has, you know, hundreds of people at his disposal, not just immediately in his vicinity, but in that entire building. He's got a whole stable of attorneys to his disposal. But anyways, we get huddled into a giant conference room that overlooks Sacramento, and we sit there and wait for Xavier Becerra to come and meet us and talk to us and kind of talk about how our internship went. So he comes in, he greets everybody, he shakes everybody's hands, we introduce ourselves, and he seems generally as a pleasant guy. I wouldn't say that he doesn't seem to be a pleasant guy. He doesn't seem like outright as the devil himself, or I know a lot of people really want me to bash him, but I don't think he seems like a very mean guy. He seems like a nice guy. I would just say he's very resolute in what he believes, and he's not very favorable to our types of ideologies, especially not, he's not very favorable to the Second Amendment and our ideologies. And so we had probably an hour and a half meeting with the Attorney General, and he asked us a lot of questions, and we got to ask questions to him. And he went through and asked us all questions about how our experience was in the internship, what did we think, stuff like that, if we had any questions for him. And when it got to the correctional law section, and the reason why I said we were pretty much like the ugly redhead stepchild of the AG's office is he was not interested in really anything that we had to say. He was very engaged with a lot of the other groups and what they were doing, the type of work that they had worked on during the summer. But when it came to us, when we were talking about the types of things that we did in regards to inmates, or, we got this case thrown out, or we did this, he really wasn't interested in it. And in my opinion, he almost made it seem as if he thought we were pretty much screwing over the inmates, is kind of the sense that I got. Even though this is an office that sits in his building, I think this is something that, if he could get rid of, or if he could have complete control of, he would do. And the reason why also I say that, this section was really not well taken care of, or was not very highly thought of, is because you could just look and see some of the, equipment and computers and phones, and just like the general offices in general were definitely on the lower end of some of the offices that I saw. When I went to some of the other sections, they had a lot nicer equipment, better phones, better offices, better views, stuff like that. And it just seemed like to me that they had better stuff to their disposal. So I can't remember specifically some of the questions I asked him. It was a lot in regards to some of the work that I had done, and just some, general stuff about passing the bar, practicing as an attorney. I had asked him stuff. But generally, my impression with meeting Xavier Becerra is he's exactly like you would think he would. He seems very much like a politician to me. He is an attorney. He's very smart. He's very witty. He doesn't come off as a bad, nasty person, but you can definitely tell sometimes when you're talking to him what his political views are. And he made it very clear, what he thought about our specific section when I was there. So that's a little insight into, the person that we're dealing with. We hear Xavier Becerra's name come up a lot with these Second Amendment cases. A lot of the times he's the named defendant because he's the AG. If you guys have any questions, or, if something comes up that maybe you think that you could ask me in relation to this topic, go ahead and write down in the comments section below, and I'll try to answer those if I can. If you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, the best way to do that is join my Patreon. I'll put a link to the Patreon down in the details. Another way you can support the channel is using the various affiliate links also found in the details. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, a nation draws a great distinction between its scholars and its warriors, while its laws are run by cowards and its wars fought by fools.